The tax deadline this year is May 17th. Americans are relieved to have an extra month to not do their taxes.
Hold, please.
Holding.
Tiger Woods is back in Florida to recover from his injuries at home. Doctors think he'll recover faster if he can do so from the comfort of his own waitress.
The White House plans to send Canada and Mexico 2.5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which has not been approved by the FDA, proving that no matter who the president is, we're always happy to lend a helping hand to our neighbors as long as we were planning on throwing away that hand.
President Biden says his dog Major will soon return to the White House. They say the dog is making progress after hiring the same trainer who worked with Eric Trump.
And finally, Russia has recalled its ambassador to the U.S. after President Biden characterized Vladimir Putin as a killer. Although, to be fair, as soon as the ambassador's plane left U.S. airspace, he was hogtied, beheaded, and tossed from the plane. Welcome to Biden time. Thank you to everyone. I see some familiar, I was going to say faces, but familiar names in the chat. Always nice to see people. I'm Christian Blatt. Triumphantly returning, at least for now, to Southern California, Scott Moore.
Yay, it's good to be back.
And, of course, Tamra Brown.
Hey there, how's everyone doing?
Triumphantly returning to the rectangle on your screen right there.
That's about all I'm returning to. Yep.
Yeah. Because it was I'm not usually smart enough to do this, but because it was the last joke, I wanted to talk about Russia for a moment. Do you think that this is the kind of trouble that Biden's going to get himself into? Because look, he's a little bit of a free speaker, and I know that we had a president previously who did that, but Biden was kind of the one guy he didn't. I'm sorry, Putin was the one guy he didn't badmouth. So just like, yeah, this guy's a killer, and it's like, you probably shouldn't have said that, Uncle Joe. And because now Biden's got he's received the thinly veiled good wishes from Putin, saying he wishes him good health, and he's demanding an apology, describing relations as very bad. I guess, I mean, look, he's calling this guy a killer, but the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who we know is a killer, he's not calling a killer. So I feel like these are those kinds of turns of phrase, Scott, that probably should be more carefully vetted. Or you have somebody like, oh my gosh, he misspoke. Like as soon as he says it, you should probably have somebody trying to spin it, right? Or you think that this is the way forward with Russia?
No, I actually think it is the way forward with Russia, because we talked about this on the podcast a couple weeks ago. As much as we didn't agree with the way that it was sort of a slap on the wrist that Biden had done with Saudi Arabia, there's so much more of an issue right now with the Middle East, and sort of just being that that powder keg that could erupt into a bigger issue. So you have to, in a way, treat that with a little bit more kid gloves, and even though obviously we don't know the administration's tactics that are confidential in the long run and classified, that there was still thought that there would be some kind of punishment or more to this at an appropriate time, but at this point it wasn't the right time to go there. And I believe with Russia, even though they may not have wanted Biden to say those exact words, I think they're pretty much on the same page of knowing that what Russia has done, meddling in our elections the past two runs, and the poisonings of adversaries that they claim are adversaries and stuff in Russia, and other things that they've been involved with, that the administration feels stronger that is something that they need to make sure that they tamp down, and they need to be very clear about that compared to the previous administration, who sort of allowed that to run roughshod for the past 4 years, and that they really do want to change that direction and the way that that's being dealt with, and go back to the more traditional allies and the traditional setups that we've had in previous administrations. So I think it was purposely done, maybe not in that exact word that they would have preferred him to use, but I do believe that was all part of the overall strategy and the plan.
Yeah, nowhere in there does anybody speaking for Putin say, well, he is not a killer. Yeah, it's more about, Tamra, you don't get to say it.
That's rude. express your opinion on the fact that Putin's a killer. Don't be rude.
Yeah, we get to point out the facts that he's a killer. We're proud of it. It is I don't know. I mean, there's only so many of these kinds of strong men left in the world, and I don't mean that in a literal sense. Just sort of that term of I'd say Kim Jong-un is still another one.
Are you
Where
saying
it's like,
Putin or Biden? Who's the strong man?
oh, definitely. I'm thinking it's Major Biden, not Joe Biden. The
Yeah.
dog is probably the strong man in that household. But I'm talking about Putin and like Kim Jong Un, or kind of like the last two guys. It's like, you might be a little bit extra delicate around them, but maybe, like Scott says, maybe this is not a slip of the tongue. This is a very calculated move.
guess that's depending on what your definition of strong is. They're certainly the most ruthless. So I agree that this was a straight. I don't think there was anything wrong with Biden saying that Putin is a killer. It's true. When I heard it, my first thought was, I wonder if the people who liked Trump because he told it like it is, even though that was not true, but like they like the frank speak. I'm wondering, if this maybe puts Biden slightly more in their favor for saying something like that. It is, he certainly should have said the same thing about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, but of course, I guess we don't. Russia doesn't have any resources that we need right now, so he's willing to speak a little bit more freely in that column.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be as simple as that, but it is always, one of those relationships that it's like, well, we're gonna watch this one carefully, and boy, it's been Putin for a long time. It was a lot easier when you were worried. I mean, Gorbachev was the Soviet Union, but man, when we had good old fun freewheeling drinking Boris Yeltsin, you didn't really worry about him. That was he was like, it seemed like a guy that Clinton would go and share a buffet at a strip club with, but now this is like, I don't know. I think that these are the kind of guys that you have to keep an eye on, but what do I know? I did want to mention something in passing. Was I thought it was interesting, and yes, there was a joke at the top of the show. I think it's interesting that after at least weeks, if not months, of asking the U.S., it's like, we have, I think it's in Maryland, we have this warehouse full of AstraZeneca vaccines, but it has not been approved for use in the United States. But a lot of the rest of the world uses it, and that other countries have been like, can we have some of those? Well, right at the point where it's like, yeah, there might be some blood clotting with that. We don't know. And then we're like, all right, we're definitely giving it away. It's like people are begging us for it. And I'm not saying, it's like we don't have our own vaccination efforts underway where I think we should be giving away the 3 that we're using here. But the one that we're not using, I think that they probably have a pretty good feeling. It's like, it's like we have the 3 that we're using. If this was the only one out there, they probably would have started using it. And the fact that it sort of takes that for them to be like, yeah, I guess. I mean, do you want this? I mean, I've definitely thrown it away anyway. I think it's, I don't know, it's interesting, but it seems to me that the indication here is that we're not going to use it. And that's why I'm sort of bringing it up. And, I was reading that Scott's home state of Florida, they've like run through their allotment of Johnson & Johnson vaccine. They're just, it's probably because it's spring break. It's it's actually you sell that vaccine with a fishbowl full of alcohol at beaches throughout Daytona.
And STD shots too.
Yeah,
that's all in one.
So you get the vaccine shot on your way into Florida, and on your way out, you get the STD shot. So it's a win-win, really. It's included in the package. But what do you think? Is that what this tells you, Scott? That this shot is probably one that's not going to be coming to any of our arms here anytime soon. So if Mexico wants it, I guess why not?
Yeah, because we have been able to ramp up the amount of doses exponentially over the past couple months, as you guys might have heard that we're getting ready to cross that 100 million mark probably as soon as today or this week. So well ahead of schedule. So That's not.
Yeah, what
one that
was
we
the? Sorry, let me
need.
just interrupt for a second. Was the 100 million guarantee? Was that by May 1st, or it's by May 1st? We're all supposed to get appointments.
That was
Which,
by May 1st, yeah,
yeah,
and then
okay,
it was open to the rest of
okay. So 100 million.
people.
Right.
So we're crossing that threshold quicker, and although they did say that they have, and again, who knows if that's really the case, but more of a comfort level, but they have come back and said that the blood clot thing is not a major issue for that AstraZeneca vaccine, and that they are allowing to move that one forward in other parts of the world. I think it was the UK that said it was fine. So I think at this point, because we have enough here, that the point is, okay, not saying that it's lesser than, but we've already been in motion with these other vaccines, that we don't necessarily need it now. We're not as far behind anymore, and that we can give it to some of these other places around the world that are still very far behind on being able to vaccinate their citizens. And we saw, Europe is kind of on another mini lockdown again, and Brazil, the cases are going up. So, this could be an opportunity to get some of these other countries up to a little bit closer in speed on getting themselves vaccinated. And of course, in Africa and other places, they're way behind as well.
Yeah, Tamra, my understanding was that Canada went through their allotment of vaccines because they had to vaccinate all of their moose first, and then they've now moved on to their
Right.
population.
Is there
Which
something? I don't see the problem.
No, I think that just they prioritize things a little differently there. But yeah, do you kind of agree that it's like we're only giving, we're only giving something away because it's like we are definitely not using this,
Sort of. It's not that the FDA didn't approve AstraZeneca. It's that AstraZeneca didn't apply for U.S. approval because of the fact that they never completed their U.S. trials. They still had like a third phase of trials to go through when the other vaccines were approved. So they never basically like completed the steps that they needed to go through to finish their FDA application. So it's more that AstraZeneca didn't fulfill their end of being approved in the U.S. Then the U.S. didn't feel that this wasn't on a high enough level for U.S. consumption, and they did complete their trials internationally, and I don't know if that includes Mexico and Canada, but they did complete their trials in other countries. So I think it just kind of makes sense that that if we do have supplies of them, that because of not crossing T's and dotting I's, we can't use them as Americans. Only makes sense to give them to places where they can be used. If I were able to get the AstraZeneca, I'd take it, because even with all the blood clots news in Europe, they're mostly saying that there's no indication that that's happening. So I don't have a problem with the AstraZeneca. I don't have a problem with Johnson and Johnson. Give me your vaccine, I'll take it.
How do you feel? We were just talking about him. How do you feel about the one that Putin started giving people? Oliver Stone went and got it in December, and I haven't heard from him since. No,
I have a feeling that vaccine gives you abs. Like you take the vaccine and it's like boom, 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 boom. So sure, I'll take that one.
I was going to say,
great.
like,
Sign
wait
me
a
up
minute.
for that then.
Yeah, like, do I have to fly to Moscow to get that, because that's worth it. That's complete. Yeah.
And then you have to complete a series of obstacle courses. But then,
look, if they said that it'll give you abs, but you'll get a mild case of COVID that you will recover from, I'm like, yeah, that's all right. That's a trade-off.
Sure.
If I'm getting the abs,
trade off.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I think that I don't know. I wonder if we had sort of a united, sort of streamlined process nationally for how this was going, because you talk to friends in other states. I have multiple friends in New Jersey who they just had to be, they're my age. They're, in their early 40s. All they had to do was be willing to drive a little ways. And, they didn't, it's not like getting some Nintendo Power cheat code or something where they were able to sign up. I've heard of that sort of thing too. But this was one of those deals where it's just like, no, you can get it. Just, do you want to drive an hour? And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, it's a friend of mine just posted that in Oklahoma, there's a sort of a widespread movement where people are just decided that they don't want to get it because they don't trust Biden, they don't trust the government in general, and it's like,
wasn't there something that in Oklahoma they're calling some people are calling Trump a liberal now because he said he encouraged the vaccine?
Yeah, well, that's what our friend Storage Yard Resident pointed out a couple weeks ago, that
Yeah.
Alex Jones loved the speech that Trump gave at CPAC, and he'd like given him like a 99 on it, and then he started talking about the vaccine, and then it bumped it down to an 80. You know, and Trump just yesterday or the day before, Trump was doing interviews on Fox News, go figure, and he was just telling people, it's like, hey, you got to get the vaccine, because he knows that like that if there's anything left for a legacy for that man, it's the vaccine. So he's like, yeah, no, we got to get people taking it. But yeah, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, can we carpool and just drive to Oklahoma and get it? I mean, it's if they don't want it, I don't know. So, but it continues to be encouraging. But I also saw, one of those stories is that it's like they're trying to see which graph is going to go higher up first, sort of the increasing in cases and then how quickly they're vaccinating people. But it continues to be encouraging. I mean, here in Los Angeles, I went on Tuesday to a restaurant to pick up food to go, and people were eating inside, and you just kind of do a double take and you're like, oh yeah, it's a restaurant. That's what happens, and I mean, and we've talked about, I think we mentioned last week that the Dodgers and Angels here in Los Angeles are going to have fans in attendance at their home openers. And just a few hours ago in New York, Governor Cuomo, talked about what everybody wanted to hear him talk about: how many people are going to be at Mets and Yankees opening day. I think that's what everybody's been waiting for him to talk about. And I think it's 25%. Which, after opening day, that's about right for the Mets, 25%. I've been at plenty of those games where 25% feels like a sellout. So, so I don't know. I just want to check in again with both of you. I feel optimistic about these things. I hear things and I'm like, these are good. And I understand that some people hear it and they're like, oh no, I'm worried. I think this is too much. Everybody's crazy. I like to think that they at least have some indication that these things are good ideas. Some of these moves that we're having, including here in Los Angeles, where I think a month ago, I wouldn't have imagined, one, that the Dodgers would have fans in attendance, but also that, you'd be able to eat inside a restaurant, even at any capacity. What do you think, Tamra? Do you feel that these are encouraging signs nationally?
I think that they're very encouraging. And I was just thinking about this earlier because a lot of my friends they have been the extreme caution through this whole pandemic, and now, still, not comfortable with people eating out and stuff like that. And my position is that if you're going to exercise this caution, that's fine, but also acknowledge all of the positive things too. Like don't yes, maybe we should still be cautious, but also, put equal attention to the fact that hospitalizations are down, vaccinations are high. The fact that these vaccines are successful in the first place, like we've got so many things to celebrate right now, considering where we were just a few months ago. Like there's so many positives going on. So I think, follow the scientists, follow what the experts and the CDC and everybody is recommending. But I'm just around too many negative Nancys that, if you're going to shake your finger at people going out to restaurants and people traveling and people doing this, spend an equal amount of attention on the fact that, hey, you have been vaccinated. These things have potential to be okay and not be as dangerous as they were just a few months ago.
Yeah, I agree. I think that look, I think the thing that most people are asking the questions about was Texas deciding to do away with the mask mandate. I think that it's like, if you're going to open the things, it's like, great, let's just keep doing the other thing, and then then the next step is maybe we don't need them, but like let's not do that all at once. And I think that, I don't know, I tend to feel pretty good about it. I've talked to friends in other states who have done things like go to the movies, and my one friend was like, I'm around more people at the grocery store, so and I think that I find it to be, it's encouraging. Just don't get carried away and don't think it means, oh great, I'm going to go.
My biggest concern about Texas and the mask thing is listening to all the business owners who are like, you've just taken away our, when we ask our customers to put on a mask, at least we had the leverage to say, hey, it's required. And now
right. It's you're able to say, look, it's not me. Okay. It's the rules. I if it were up to me, you wouldn't have to wear them. And then it's like, well, great. Then I'm not going to wear them. What do you think, Scott? Is it encouraging, but cautiously encouraging? Like, let's not let's walk before we run.
Yeah, no, I think it's very encouraging, and in line with where the numbers are at with the cases and the numbers of people getting vaccinated. So I absolutely think that just looking at it's such a refreshing place to be this time this year, because this time last year everything was being shut down, and now we're seeing this time at this point of the year it's kind of like a nice reboot, because it's the same time of year, and now we're seeing the positivity of reopening things back up, which will seem to be almost like a permanent thing, and that we're edging closer to normal. And as someone who's been in North Carolina the past 2 months, they've had this sort of balance the whole time. A lot of movie theaters were still not open, but indoor dining was open at a restricted like 25%, and you had gyms open in a slight amount. So I've already kind of gotten used to seeing that nice balance. And there was still requirement by the state. They have a Democratic governor there that was still requiring masks to be worn. And there was a really good balance. And I think, again, that masks do help in general. And if people are sensible and they don't have necessarily underlying health conditions, and they're wearing their masks and they're keep the hand sanitizer and wash their hands, beyond COVID, it helps with flu and seasonal colds and other things as well. And so I do think it can be done practically. And I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but I've been on 16 planes over the past 6 months. But you do it sensibly.
Show
and
off.
As I tell people, no, but I'm saying for me, it doesn't work for everybody. But for people that have to go for work and other reasons, if you're sensible about it and you take those precautions and you do wear your masks and you cover your nose and you bring hand sanitizer and you wash your hands, there are ways of doing things sensibly. And yes, if things can be outdoors and it makes sense, and that's great. But I do believe it's the right thing to do at this point in time. And it is optimistic. And I think it continues to show that optimism to people that might be skeptical, to say, hey, well, we're at a point now where we do feel as a government more confident to allow people to edge back into everyday living. But again, still being cautious and still wearing a mask, even if you've been vaccinated. And that's important. But you're right, with the Texas thing, Tamra, that does take the edge off of these corporations and companies that are requiring face masks. I remember being in Florida last September, and they actually got rid of basically face mask mandates and were open to full capacity in the middle of September last year, and they've never shut back down. But a lot of businesses were still requiring you to wear a mask when you went in, and I saw most people were abiding by that, which was great. But when you're in a restaurant, and a crowded 100% occupied restaurant indoors, and nobody's wearing masks, and people are sitting next to each other in bars that don't know each other, it's definitely disconcerting. But in general, I think it can be done, and it's good to see that we're going in that right direction now, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's the interesting thing to talk about. Where we are now versus a year ago. I mean, when you think about it, it was 53 weeks ago when we had to stop doing the earlier incarnation of this very show in studio, and we had to do it on our computers. And look where we are now. So obviously we've come so far. Honestly, that studio is like 8 minutes from my house, and I still prefer this. But
I know, I was just gonna say, I prefer this where I can just roll right in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No,
by the way, Scott's eligibility for his vaccine is because he's got the frequent flyer miles.
That's how you get it.
Now they move all the way to the end. Then now they're like, well, if you travel, then you put yourself in a position so you're the very last person to get it now.
And I've talked about this a few times, that I feel like this will only instill some good long-term habits in all of us. Like I can't imagine ever letting myself run out of hand sanitizer, at least in the car, but probably in my pocket. Like I'll probably, especially if I go to, a sporting event or a concert, whenever those happen again, it's just like when you think, I took my kids to I can't remember if I talked about it on the show. We took my kids to the San Diego Zoo in February, and they had added so many, it's hand sanitizer dispensers like everywhere. And I'm like, these should have always been at the zoo. It's like, not just
there are so many things that I say that about the city and the places where near like homeless encampments where we now have porta potties and
Sure.
the hand washing stations. And it's like, why haven't we always had this? Like we should have always had those things.
No,
exactly.
No, I definitely agree. And I don't know. Well, I have to see. Jacob Downey in the chat is giving us some useful advice, which is wipe your hands when you touch a door, walk around the turnstiles. But then he says masks might not be worn for 30 minutes. I think it depends on what you're doing. It's if you're on the plane, I don't think you get to take it off in 30-minute increments. And Scott, did you find that typically people didn't have to be reminded to put their masks back on? I guess they let you they don't serve you food, but if you bring food, you can eat it. They're not going to tell you can't eat right on the plane, or are you supposed to not even eat?
No. And they do bring by snacks and stuff. They're just not really serving like beverage service or anything like that. I mean, I on my flight back a couple weeks ago, there was a flight attendant that had to keep reminding the gentleman next to me to keep covering his nose. But again,
by the way, let me just interrupt again. Of course, it's the guy next to you.
Yes,
you get the seat next to the guy who like wears the mask down here. Like what?
Exactly. but I will say, again, this helped that the Biden administration, unlike the previous administration, put some teeth behind that mandate instead of just making it an airline thing. Which again, the airlines had a lot of power because even before, when the Trump administration did not do that federally, airlines could say, hey, we're kicking you off if you don't do this. But now they have teeth behind it with it's a federal law now, thanks to the Biden administration, that you have to wear a mask. So it gives the airlines a little bit more authority now to be like, great, if you don't wear it, you're off, permanently. And, it can affect them for traveling on future other airlines as well. So it definitely added some teeth to that federal mandate. And when you get on, they actually announce it and say, this is a federal mandate, federal law to please keep the mask on at all times, other than active eating and drinking. But yeah, so most of the time most people are used to it now. It's been a good 8 months or more for most people that this type of mandate has been in place. So it's becoming part of our daily lives now. And so most people are getting more comfortable with it, even if they don't necessarily like it.
Yeah. And I mean, an airplane with the recycled air and all that, I know that they have taken efforts to do what they can to, keep it as clean as possible. But that seems like, again, something that we probably could have been wearing masks on flights, for our whole lives. And, you depending on where you were flying, like when I flew to China, there sure were a lot of people wearing masks. And I'm like, well, you're going to be on the airplane all that time? Where, and then you're like, oh, I get it. They know what they're doing. Tamra, we mentioned him in passing, Andrew Cuomo, and he has continued to have, more allegations lobbied against him. Some of them, obviously the majority of them are of the sexual harassment variety, but then all the other ones come out of the woodwork. And I'm sort of wondering if you think, is he taking a sort of the page that a lot of people felt Al Franken, when he resigned, people thought maybe he did it too quickly and there wasn't a hearing at least. And when you compare what he did to what Andrew Cuomo did, certainly seems like it is something he probably could have gotten away with. Do you think that he's just convinced it's like, I'm going to be able to get through this? I mean, Biden,
whatever
Biden
he's
spoke
thinking.
out. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Whatever he's thinking, Cuomo, doesn't make sense to me, because at this point it's like nobody, no matter what happens, nobody's going to be like, oh, he didn't do it. Oh, it was all a misunderstanding. It was all a mistake. Like he's tarnished, and all he can do now is resign, especially with more and more other politicians calling for him to resign. And the nursing home mishap, what do you call it? Mishandling of the nursing home numbers on
Sure.
top of that. Like he really should resign, and he really should resign the most sort of save face way that he could do it, I would imagine, is to be like, I'm going to resign out of respect for the people that are my constituents that are asking me to resign. So I will for that reason. If he wants to, if he feels that resigning is like admitting something, maybe that's why he's not doing it. But I really don't know what he could be thinking. Like it to me, it only makes sense for him to step down. And also too, when we initially started talking about this, we brought up how like CNN wasn't reporting on it, but maybe in that first week, CNN is absolutely, it's all over CNN now.
Well, yeah,
so.
no, that was definitely that week, and I think that Chris Cuomo wasn't on a couple nights. I don't know actually what's happening now. I didn't think about it. I haven't thought to look in on that, but yeah, that's what I said, is that what they should be doing is they should be the ones reporting it the most, because there's this sort of air of like, well, his brother's on our network, but also completely understand if they don't have him covering that story. Even if he still does his show, you can cover it on his show.
Awkward. I wouldn't want to watch that. That would be just awkward.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I would actually really want to watch that. I'd want to watch him try to talk about it, and and then at the end, he'll throw in the "I told you mom liked me best," whatever. Like their whole thing has been whenever they've been interviewed together. Scott, what do you think? Do you think that look? Obviously, it can be people of any degree of power. It can be very difficult to realize that resigning is the right course of action. He seems to not feel that, but I mean, I feel like everybody who is giving him any kind of advice would be like, you can't just hang in there for this.
I kind of, and I hate to say this, I'm not saying anything against the Me Too movement, but I don't necessarily think in this particular situation he needs to resign right now. I think it needs to go through the proper channels. As I said, they're doing an investigation, and if they need to, and they vote on, I know the state legislature is going to vote on impeachment, and while they're doing the trial, he technically is off from being governor, and so the lieutenant governor becomes the acting governor. And then if at that point, if they say, he's guilty or whatever, and they remove him from office, then that would be a route that he could do. I think the nursing home thing is actually the bigger scandal, manipulating those numbers and everything. And so that's a more something that affects day-to-day lives.
At least something that has to do with his actual job.
With his actual job.
And the harassment did too, but
look, I think if the harassment never came up, you could still be having the exact same conversation.
I agree. And that's to me more of the issue right now. And not saying that I don't believe the women, but I think there needs to be a course, because what happens is everyone gets quick to judge and say, okay, goodbye. But yet you see people like Donald Trump who had same issues, and they never were ever really brought to light, and that's okay. And we know he had multiple affairs, and he paid off Stormy Daniels, and he had other issues like that too. Granted, that was before he was president, but those were things too as well that it feels like one party is more like, let's go ahead and have them resign before they have a fair trial, which to me is, again, part of our justice system is they're innocent until proven guilty. And again, I do believe these women, and there's enough women and there's enough evidence to suggest that he definitely was involved in this, but at the same time, it should be heard and known that, okay, he did, and then take the proper actions rather than rushing the judgment and saying someone should just resign. And we saw that with Governor Ralph Northam in Virginia. He again, not the same similar thing with sexual harassment, but of things that happened in his past that he held through and did not resign. Obviously, Virginia is different than New York in the fact that you can only be governor for one term, and consecutively, you can't run for re-election. Whereas in New York State, you can run forever and keep getting reelected. And Andrew Cuomo was being very defiant recently, and he was going to run for a fourth term. You can see that, though, that the majority of New Yorkers as well kind of back him up and saying they don't think he should resign for the allegations, but they're more likely to say he should resign for the nursing home numbers being fibbed. So yes, he's in a precarious position, but I don't think that he should be resigning at this moment until they have a better idea of like where that line is and what he's actually done or not done.
Right. And I think that you sort of the point you make where you don't necessarily resign, but you step back, let the lieutenant governor handle the day-to-day, and actually
she's the acting governor.
I can see that part happening, because if he does resign, I guess there's a fear that a Republican would replace him, and there's I'm like, I don't think that the makeup in that state is such that that's actually what would happen, right?
No, and the lieutenant governor is a Democrat, and so she would
Yeah,
become governor.
she would actually
So
become governor. Yeah,
correct. So she would not be acting governor. She'd become governor, and then she could extensively run in 2022. So I don't. Yeah, so I don't think that's an issue at all as far as the dynamics of the state. They have not had a Republican governor since George Pataki, and that's been 14 years ago now when he left. So
and they've never had a woman governor.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, even
So
even New Jersey can show them up with with Christy Todd women. I do remember when George Pataki became governor, and I remember that I didn't vote for him. And literally, I think his first day in office, he raised the speed limit on the throughway and the major highways and interstates to 65 from 55. I'm like, oh, this guy's not so bad. Yeah, the rest of it beyond there, sure. But I was just like, oh, I can drive faster now. Great. This was like my first year in college, I think. I'm like, great, I can probably get to school a little faster. Comment that I don't necessarily agree with, I'll bring up from Michael B. I find it surprising that when Andrew Cuomo was getting New York through the pandemic with no help from the Trump administration, I believe that would be true. No one said boo about these women. Now folks are coming through it and they pop up. I think that a lot of times it does take someone coming forward for other people to feel like, oh, you know what? I think this seems like a good time for it. I don't tend to want to speak for any of them, but I don't know. I mean, Tamra, have you seen that maybe not even necessarily for this instance? I think a lot of times, we saw that with Harvey Weinstein. It's like when the first people started to talk about it, it's like, you know what, I actually had a thing with Harvey Weinstein too. That
because
really
if it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's like you come forward after somebody else has, and they're saying, oh, you're just piling onto the bandwagon. But if you don't come forward, then they're saying, well, it's just this one person and it's her word against his. So either way, people are questioning whether or not you're legit, whether you come forward or whether you don't. They're going to, give him the benefit of the doubt. So yeah, it makes sense that, somebody comes forward and then other people come forward to corroborate, yes, this is true. And they always, the reasons that, why didn't you come forward sooner? Because the plethora of reasons. It hurts my job. It hurts my credibility. I don't want my name going public. It hurts, it all just multiple reasons. If anybody hasn't watched The Morning Show, it was really great. Sort of examination of the Me Too movement and why things happen the way that they do. But yeah, whenever anyone says like, oh, why do all these people come forward at once? It's like, because it sort of creates a space where now they're kind of able to when they weren't before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. Michael, with the follow-up comment, as far as the nursing home scandal, what about all the GOP governors who let their folks run wild maskless? If you go for him, go for them. The man did the best he could with what he had. I think that the initial handling of the nursing homes isn't the problem. It's the actively altering what the data was. I look, I don't even get that upset when somebody misleads the media. You're not under oath when you're, giving a press conference. You can kind of, tweak it a little bit if you want to. But when you actually take the data and you falsify the data, I think that's what the real problem is with that scandal. And I think that, look, people that are governors that are letting people run around maskless, like you're saying, I think that a lot of them do get called out. Nationally, at least. In any case, I wanted to, before we ran out of time, I wanted to talk about the filibuster. There's a lot of this talk. Scott's Twitter buddy, Mitch McConnell, has said that if Democrats try to get rid of the filibuster, that Republicans will turn the Senate into a 100-car pileup. And I'm just like, has he just not paid attention to how the Senate has run? Over I don't know, the last 20 years. I'm like, that's what it seems like. It's been a 500-car pileup. So that seems like it would be progress. What do you see objectively, Scott? The pros and cons of making changes with the filibuster. To me, the biggest problem is you're not going to be in power forever. So then you're going to let the other side have that power when perhaps you would rather they don't. But what do you think, Scott? I'll ask you first. He's going to have to take a drink of water for that because he's like, I got a lot to say.
He's gearing up.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The issue is that the fact of the matter is that when the other side has power, they'll do other things, and Mitch McConnell threatened to make abortion illegal and all these other things that again wouldn't necessarily happen even with a Republican Senate majority again. And yes, you do run the risk of, like we've talked about before, it's like one side, and it's sort of what happens with executive orders with presidents. It's like one side does all these things, then the next president comes in and reverses all of them with these executive orders. And so you could see potentially a lot of that kind of stuff happening where, the Democratic Senate is going to do a bunch of things, and for a couple of years, they're going to have some more progressive things on the books, and then the Republicans will take it over, and then they're going to reverse all that and put their conservative spin on things. But at the same time, the filibuster has turned into something it wasn't necessarily intended for. And so maybe there is an opportunity to have some changes. And in the past, as we know, even up till the early 80s, we had Republicans and Democrats that would work together across the aisle to make things happen. And there was more similarities than differences. But now we've seen both parties go to more of the extremes. So finding those middle moderate voices like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski on the Republican side, and Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema on the Democratic side are becoming less and less of those type of senators now. So maybe there is something to be said that it is time to update it. And so sort of the compromise right now that Democrats are talking about is still allowing the filibuster to a point and allowing the other side to talk ad nauseum until they finally give up, and then going to a vote and having that as a simple majority. So instead of just gumming up the works and not letting anything happen, this would be an opportunity to still allow the filibuster to stay in place to some degree. But at the end of the day, you're prolonging the inevitable of having a majority being able to still be able to vote in certain things. But we've seen it already being chipped away anyways. I mean, we saw it first with Harry Reid, which we've talked about for years, about how he opened the door with allowing just judges and federal judges to be done by a simple majority. And then Mitch McConnell blasted the door open by allowing it to happen with Supreme Court justices, because obviously that would never have happened either without Democratic support over these past 4 years with Trump. And now the next thing is being able to say, okay, now we need to do it for all legislation. And to some degree, it could be helpful because, look, if the Democrats get the Voting Rights Act on the books, that allows them to have an opportunity to keep their majority. Because by far, Democrats outnumber Republicans across the country, and what is it, like 40 million more people are in a place where the 50 Democrats are represented compared to the 50 Republicans. So Democratic policies would win more, and if there is more of an opportunity to vote, that would probably lend itself for Democrats to be able to keep a Senate majority in the future. It's Republicans will have to play catch up and not try to do the reverse of voter suppression and still have to try to work. And look, elections have consequences, as we see. So if people get out and vote and Republicans win, then they get that opportunity to do the things they want to do. And if it's unpopular, then in 2 years, the Democrats can come back and say, look, these are the things that worked or didn't work. And same thing for the Democrats. So it does definitely up the game, the ante a lot more because of the back and forth that could happen. But at some point, it may also help to smooth out the long-term extremities now, because at some point, the back and forth is going to get tiring to most Americans, and going back and forth with majorities is going to get tiring. And at some point, it may actually help bridge that gap together a little bit more once these extreme things get worked out of the system. But otherwise, it's bad for democracy to allow voting restrictions to happen, and to have a minority party in power through voting restrictions does not set up a good precedence for democracy in the future. And so we'll see what happens, but that's a good compromise. I think what the Democrats want to do is a very good, solid compromise.
So you're in favor of tweaking it as opposed to getting rid of it?
Yes, I'm
that's
opposed
what
to
you're
tweaking
saying.
it. Yes, I think that's a good compromise. Absolutely a good compromise.
What do you think, Tamra? You want to just get rid of the filibuster?
I'm voting. I'm agreeing green on the tweaking. Scott just filibustered, and I'm voting in agreement.
So until he started talking, you were like, get rid of it. And then you're like, you know what? Yeah. So that was a real Mr. Smith goes to Washington moment right there. See, look at that. You were able to sell her on that. Yeah, I think that I see. I mean, I see that this voting rights legislation being something that is very important for Democrats. I mean, I don't know when we're going to deal with any kind of redistricting and gerrymandering. When you look, there's plenty of these districts that benefit Democrats that are drawn in a way where it's like it's a map and it like thins out here and then goes really long this way and then down and you're like, well, why is that? Why isn't it just a better representation? And I think that has to happen at the state level, right? So it's like we can't actually do anything with that. So when people show up to vote, and there are states that I think have you're able to. There are states that have required ID to vote, and there are plenty that don't. And I don't know. I think that you get your arguments as to why you can't have it. I think that for a lot of us, we can seem like, well, sure, what's the problem with showing your ID? But then, of course, you have plenty of people who don't have IDs. Especially. Like a great example would be, how many people I knew in New York City that were in their like early 20s. They didn't have a driver's license. So it's like, yeah, I guess you can show your passport, but you might not have that either because not everybody travels out of the country for fun.
ID. I don't have a driver's license, but I have a state ID.
Is that because you lost it because of your felony records, Tamra? Is that why you don't have a driver's license?
Yeah, too much vehicular manslaughter.
Well, and the other point to the ID thing that I always say to people is that it does unfairly disadvantage folks that, like you said, are living in poverty, move around, live maybe in a rural state and are 100 miles away from DMV or somewhere to get their ID and live alone, are infirm or have health issues. And to be able to go and get an ID is a difficult thing, but their voting booth may be around the corner from their house. And so it does set up more of a thing for people that don't have the ability to get an ID, as opposed to folks that have access to getting IDs or have more resources or money or anything else. So it is a restriction for people to be able to vote. And understandably, you can argue about ID laws and you can't get on a plane without an ID to show. But at the same time, these are folks that never leave, like you said, don't have a passport because they've never left the country. I've met many people that haven't left their hometown their entire lives, or haven't left their home state, which is, they're only like 100 miles from the border of their own state. So there is certain things where you have to think where people aren't necessarily well enough to be able to do those things, to be able to get an ID. And so you are making a disadvantage for certain people that can be looked at as you're restricting the vote on certain people or certain groups of people that may not have the same access as other people do. And that voting is a universal right, and not everybody has to go on a plane, or not everybody has to drive a car, or, but voting should be that basic universal right in this country. And that by putting those restrictions on there, you are preventing those people having that right to vote, because nobody's saying you have to go drive. Nobody's saying you have to go get on a plane to go travel somewhere or whatever else. But everyone's saying that it's an inalienable right that you're born with as a citizen, or as acquired as a citizen, that you should have that right regardless.
Well, and I think Jacob Downey kind of boils it down to very simply, IDs cost money. So, voting should be free,
Exactly.
but it's if it's, early in the year and you're like, oh, I really want to be able to vote in November, but I have to go and get an ID. And, it's like, oh, is that really where I want to put my money towards?
But that's what I'm saying. It's the resources again. And some people have those resources and other people do not. So it's exactly that case.
And great comment from TK, also known as Coltrane. How does it bridge the partisan divide gap if one party passes laws to maintain power? That creates more animosity and expands differences. It allows for no compromise. I certainly understand the point. If that is, I guess the argument would be that this voting rights legislation would benefit Democrats. Now, the argument to that would be that I think that if Republicans could work on their national appeal, then
numbers, it would benefit Democrats because there are more Democrats.
Then it would also benefit them. I mean, but I certainly understand the point. It's like being able to pass laws to stay in power. And he also changed to make IDs
That's
free, and add a bonus day off from work to get it. Problem solved. But and look, now that you can vote like over a week and things in a lot of places, it's great. But I mean, I think it was Ross Perot who was saying like you should, this back in 1992, saying like, why is election day on a Tuesday? Why can't you vote over the weekend? And being able to vote by mail and all that stuff, it only helps. Look,
or if it's on a Tuesday, why is it not a national holiday?
Yeah, right. Exactly. If it has to be on Tuesday and you stand by that, it's like, why are people having to try and figure out a way to do it? And look, Sam says you need an ID for everything, but honestly, depending on what your life is and where you live, you don't. I mean, look, if you've never been beneath 96th Street in Manhattan, you probably don't need an ID. If you're going to pay for cash and things like that. David House, you make the point. I had to show an ID to get my vaccine. I had to show an ID to check out a book at the library, and most states allow you to cast a provisional ballot even with that ID. So your state provides free state issued IDs. I think that is a great step, and it would solve a lot of what we're talking about. I think that there are plenty of states that don't do that, and you have other states that won't do that. Yeah, David, I actually forget what state you live in. I know we've talked before, so if before we leave, just jump in, David, and tell us what state you live in. And look, Michael B is saying it. How about a 3-day voting weekend at least? I mean, did we have like a whole month we could have voted in California this year? I mean, I know they expanded it. They had the drop-off boxes were everywhere, and the actual in-person voting was open. And I love this from so he lives in Alabama. That's great. By the way, that's great that Alabama gives out national IDs.
Great that Alabama does that.
I had no idea that they did that. So that, I think that solves a lot of these problems. Let me just throw in one more comment from TK. Agreed. Make election day a national holiday. Problem solved. He's all about solutions. So thank you for that.
But I'll say it does. But at the same time, if you live out in the middle of rural Alabama, it goes back to the point again. You have to have a picture. I mean, do they make it easy that you could take a picture at home? That's what I'm saying. You still have to go to a location to do that. And not everybody has that ability to do that because they live 100 miles away from that DMV or whatever. They're out in the middle of nowhere. And as you were saying before, Christian, some people can go on their everyday lives and they don't have, they'd have to look for their birth certificate and other forms to be able to prove the ID. And again, it is a hassle for certain folks. So it should be as easy as possible if they have to get a birth certificate to prove their ID. If the things that they would have to do, again, it should not be a restriction to voting, because to me, voting is very different from saying you're going to a library, because again, you don't have to use the library. You don't have to do these certain things, but voting is a right for everybody. And that's the difference, again, that people are missing that point. An ID for certain things, for a vaccine or a doctor's office or whatever, because you have insurance or not, those are very different things that are different, which I don't necessarily agree with. It should be done at a healthcare place either. But in general, that's the difference. This is a right. Everything else is optional. You don't have to go to the library. You don't have to go to the, on the plane. You don't have to drive. So that's where the difference is. So people that are making those arguments are not thinking about this is a basic right for every single person. And what we can do to make it as easy for those folks that have that right to vote, rather than restricting that right and taking it away from people, is not the way to handle it. And if Republicans have a good enough sales plan on who they are as a party, then accessing, like Tamra said, more people to vote will actually bring more people in the fold and may eventually help Republicans in the future as well. But if they don't, and they're restricting votes to maintain power, that's where you have an issue with that, because now you're trying to make it harder for people to vote. And they know, as they've clearly said, they will lose unless they restrict voting. So that's why they're doing it.
And our pal Sam Whitfield, even as a conservative-ish Republican, I'm for making voting a holiday. And I think having it be on a holiday, but also not confining it to one day, I think that all works. And Michael B has a point. Mobile ID units for rural areas. Plus, they should have mobile units for health as well. I don't disagree with either of those things. And if David's state of Alabama offers those things to people who live, in the more rural areas, then more power to them. Final word from Coltrane. I don't like the birth certificate arguments. I don't know a single person in 2021 who can't get a birth certificate. You do have to pay for it to have a new birth certificate issued. So it goes back to that.
Yeah, I lost my birth certificate. I don't have it. And to get the real ID, I have to pay for it. to have
Yeah.
it sent from the state of Illinois. So that, again, it's a money thing. So you either have to make it free for people to access it or not, because again, you're putting a barrier up for certain folks, for sure.
I don't know about you, Tamra, but it sounds to me like Scott's selling birth certificates, and I think.
But like I wouldn't even know. I don't know where my birth certificate is. So let's say I don't have it. I don't know the process of how I would. I didn't know that a state has the birth certificate. So I just have to. I'd have to Google how do I get my birth certificate. And for somebody who, again, is rural, old, maybe you don't have access to the internet. You don't have your birth certificate. You're just
right.
You know, that's the big problem with a lot of, like a huge issue within trying to get homeless people into housing is that they, through the process of how they got to where they were, they don't have their papers and documents and things like that. So to get, just to get an ID, you need two other or three other forms of ID, which they don't have that either. So it's just like to get to step 3, you need steps 1 and 2, and you don't have any of them.
Yeah, you need your social security card, and TK making the point that we could make birth certificates free, and that would really eat into Scott's business of selling them, though. So let's not do that.
It would.
In any case, I wanted to let everybody know that we will not be doing a show next week because I will be away. My son is on spring break from his computer school, from his distance learning. You get a spring break from that too. And we'll be renting a house in Palm Springs. I mentioned that because when you think of this show next week and how it's not on, just assume that I'm in the pool, the heated pool. Thank you very much. But we'll be back the following Monday, the 29th. And we'll be back at the usual time of 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And then once we get into April, we're really going to buckle down and try and figure out what day we're going to do the show. We all have some scheduled things coming up that we're trying to let land, and then we'll see what the best day is. But we appreciate everybody who joined us in the live chat and everybody who watches the show. And we hope you miss us next week so that you're that much more excited to find us on Monday, March 29th. But until Monday, March 29th, Tamra, where can people find you?
Find me on TikTok at Hey Tamra.
And Scott, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at SMan80. That's SMan80.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and not just like, but also subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, where you will get this show. You'll get our show Marvel Movie Talk, where we'll be beginning this week providing wrap-ups for the new Falcon and Winter Soldier series. And the Blackcast continues. We did a special about 90 minutes yesterday reviewing the latest Alice Cooper album with the comedian Don Jameson, Mark Cicchini from the Three Sides of the Coin podcast, and my friend Carson, who is part of the Big D and Bubba show. So you get a very much a mixed bag when you subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, but hopefully there's something there for everyone. Thanks so much to everybody who joined us. And if you're watching the archive version, leave a comment. I always love responding to those comments after the fact. If Sam's going to say I love the Bladdertainment group, I'm not going to take that away. I like that he's turned it into that word. So come back for more Bladdertainment. In any case, thank you all to everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.